Oh, I love starting these podcasts, and you can just tell everyone in the room's kind of bopping along, having a good time. I got to shout out Peter Trulin. Thank you for this amazing bumper music. This is the Rec Poker Podcast, folks. You know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune from Peter Trulin, because it's time for another week of madness here on the Strategy Forums edition of the Rec Poker Podcast. Now, my name's Jim Reid. I'm your host. I'm Bluff Starini in the home game and at RecPoker Jim on the hellscape we call Twitter. And I have the best freaking job in the world, hanging out here with my friends, talking about this fantastic game that we love called poker every Monday night while we steal each other's chips in the Play Money home game. Now, I have to start by mentioning that we are brought to you by Running Aces, the fantastic hotel, racetrack, and casino that is the official sponsor of the Rec Poker Podcast. And you can find out more about them by going to runaces.com. Most of what we do here is free. We're a largely volunteer-based organization, so we really depend on the support of our sponsors and of our premium members who take part in our training material and social activities and fun poker related themed things, everything. We do different events every day, home games, road trips, study groups, book studies, just a million ways to engage with other thoughtful, fun, recreational players like us. That's what we do over here at Rec Poker. Most of it's free. You can sign up for a free membership by just going to rec.poker. All it takes is an email address and a smile, but we do insist on both. But if you want to take your game to the next level, we have a fantastic premium membership that you can join for $15 a month. That's right, folks. That's a $15 a month. Can't tell me that's not excellent value. And you can even get your first month for only $5 by using the code RecPoker at checkout. Now, let me host the show on Mondays. You're probably used to hearing my name by now, or my voice by now, but I am just one of the folks that make the magic happen here. It takes a whole crew, a gang, a crowd, the crew of wizards that we like to call our leadership team here is the Wrecking Crew, because we're a punny bunch and we put the word wreck in as many things as we possibly can here at Rec Poker. If you want to find out more about the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, but you can also just listen up. You're going to meet a few of them right here tonight on the air. Take it away, Mark.
So I'm Mark Zhang, and on the first of the month, on the first Thursday of the month, we have my office hours where we talk poker and strategy.
I'm Rob Washam. You can find me as Rabman50 just about everywhere. And on the first and third Wednesdays of every month, we get together and talk about the latest poker books.
It's a lot of fun. It's just a couple of the features that we do in our premium membership here every month. Every Wrecking Crew member has their own kind of area of expertise or strength or their way of sharing their love of poker with the rest of our members. And you can, like I say, find out more at rec.poker/crew. One of the perks of being a premium member is that you get to hang out with this bunch of ungodly gentlemen on the forums edition of the podcast every week. I'm proud to be welcoming back relatively new premium member, Terry. Why don't you tell the folks at home a little about yourself, Terry?
Hey guys, Terry from Calgary. I'm a brand new member here. I'm not new to the poker at all, but still learning all the time. Been learning for the last, I guess, probably close to 25 years.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be here. Like I said, I'm a student just like everybody else. We learn in every tournament we play.
Cheers. Well, welcome to the Rec Poker family, Terry. Looking forward to getting to know you even better over the next little while.
Absolutely.
We're also joined by Lauchlan Swann. If you've been listening for the last few weeks, you know that Lauchlan is also a premium member who has been really kind of ascending into the poker world in Australia. Lauchlan, just in case folks missed one of the previous episodes, why don't you introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit about you before we get into the action of the latest hand that you've posted in the Rec Poker forums.
Yeah, so hi, this is Lauchlan. I go by Dingo on the Discord or Swan Poker on Instagram, where you can follow. I've recently started playing poker full time. I wouldn't call myself a professional, but I digress in that. This is the final table this week we're talking about. So obviously made a very deep run in the Australian Poker Open. The inaugural series was $1 million guaranteed event, 3,300 entry. So yeah, it was really surreal to get to this moment, especially just after deciding to play full time for the next 8 months. So obviously very exciting. Like at the start of this hand, at the start of the day, yeah, and very surreal. And obviously coming up through pub poker and stuff like that, I leaned on RecPoker to learn and study and just listen to the podcast. So it's really cool to be on here again. So thanks for having me.
It's very cool, Lauchlan. Well, you're such an interesting story in the poker world, and as you say, took a real leap of faith pretty recently to start playing full time, and left your job behind, and kind of had the faith in your abilities and your impressive results over the last couple of years as well to take that plunge. You're joined, I was mentioning earlier, Mark Zhang, who's here on the show as well, is also a professional MTT player. So we're going to hear some insights from some premium members, some RecCing Crew members, some playing pros, and we're going to talk about this hand that you posted into the RecPoker forums from the final table of the Australian Poker Open. So let me set the scene a little bit here. So we're down to the last 4 players in the whole damn thing. And the current payouts, as referenced here, 4th place gets 85,000, 3rd place gets 115,000, 2nd place gets 200,000, and 1st place gets 340,000. But we should note that everyone has already been awarded $5,000 when they made the money. So it's not 85,000, it's 90, it's not 115, it's 120, et cetera, et cetera. But there's some real money here, and you've already locked up 90K by being in this position with only 4 to play. And I'm guessing, Lauchlan, this is already at this point your biggest score as a player.
Yeah, so a 90K would be my biggest score if I had come 4th. Previous was 55,000, so considerably quite a lot more. And
Yeah.
like the goal to the end of the year was to get 100K, and the one tournament in winnings, the one tournament brought it over that by considerably. So yeah,
Fantastic. And this, I really like the way that you've approached this. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, where you left things with your job that you're going to give yourself 8 months. You're going to try this poker thing for real, but you're not burning any bridges. You didn't do the old "F you, I'm out of here." Light the place on fire on your way out. So you've got something waiting for you if things don't work. You've given yourself this target of making $100,000 in tournament wins this year. Before you entered this tournament, you're already halfway there. Now it feels like you're just on the cusp of really crushing all your goals for this year, and it's only March. So very, very exciting position to be in. So we're 4-handed, and at this point, you are the 2nd in chips, I think you said. So there's 4 players left, but only one of them has more chips than you. So
yes,
yeah, please.
Oh, sorry. There's one stack that's considerably really short, 7 bigs at this point. Did the stack in 3rd has a couple million less than me, and then I'm covered by a couple million as well.
So the dynamic is that there's a chip leader. There's you that's down a bit from there. There's a 3rd player that's a little shorter than you, and then there's a 4th player that's a consensus short stack here. And so that dynamic really matters, because once you start getting into these ICM pressure spots, the stack size is probably the most important factor to consider when it comes to hand selection, who you're going to play against aggressively, the lines that you're going to take, because you really would hate to bust before that short stack busts, because that's a big ladder to go from 90K to 120K. And if everyone just takes their time and waits for the bad beat to happen, typically what's going to happen is that short stack player is going to bust, everyone else gets to ladder up, and that becomes a factor. In this particular hand, the chip leader, I'm sure, is opening a lot of hands at this point, because they get to apply a lot of ICM pressure, and you and the 3rd place player are in chip by chip stack are actually under the most pressure. I feel like the short stack is actually under less pressure. They're sort of due to bust next anyway. So it's really you and that third place player that have to sort of be careful going up against the big dog and against each other. So did you have a sense, Lauchlan? Let me just ask you before we get into the nuts and bolts of this hand. Were the other players ICM aware? Like, did they know how important stacks were? Like, because ICM pressure is one of those things that you can only apply it if people know what it is. How savvy were the other players?
So I would say on the remaining four, I was the least experienced. I was the one that decided at this point I'd already got the biggest score and I was going to try and win it. So the ICM to me, while important, wasn't as big as a factor perhaps to some of the other people still on the table. There's the 30 chips at the time is uber rich, so ICM doesn't matter at all. And the other two, I would say, definitely had more ICM care than I did. But at this point, I'm like, I've come all this way. I had a huge portion of myself. I was already winning more than I ever have. I was ready to try and just win it all. So I was ready to battle against the big stack, who I felt I had a post-edge flop advantage on.
Yep, that makes sense. And if you have a sense that that you can apply pressure, because everyone's under some ICM pressure, even the big stack here. It's not like they're not under any pressure. They don't want to double you up, and now they're the short stack, and so you can definitely apply pressure on people that are feeling it. Okay, so let's keep that dynamic in mind as we get into the hand here. So we are in the small blind. And the villain, they open to two big blinds, which is to 200,000. So the blinds are 100,000, 200,000, and there is a 200,000 big blind. We are in the small blind and wake up with a pretty strong hand, pocket aces. So that's a great way to start the whole conversation here. They open to two. It's us on the small blind, and we're pretty deep here. If it's 200,000, so we've got about, if my math is right here, is it like 40 big blinds or so? The effective stack is about 8 million, 8.6 million.
Mark. I think 80 big blinds effective, so the big blind is 100,000.
Oh, you're right. Thank you for clarifying. So we're still in very deep stacks here for four-handed near the end of the tournament. Thanks for clarifying that, Mark. So 80 big blinds, that's pretty deep. I noticed that two big blinds is still the open, which has been consistent at this tournament, despite it being deeper in the later stages than you would typically see. We're in the small blind. I think this is a mandatory 3-bet. When we're deep like this and out of position, I tend to sort of default to a larger 3-bet sizing. But you've gone with a 500,000, which is 5 big blinds. So they make it 200,000. You make it 500,000. My gut tells me that that's sort of smaller than I might choose here in this spot. If we all had 20 bigs or something, then the smaller sizing makes sense. But I feel like, again, in a default, I feel like we're giving our opponent an easy decision. We're just going to continue with a lot of the range that they choose to make that open with. And if we made it, 7 big blinds or 6.5 big blinds, we might put them in a more difficult position. I'm curious. So Lauchlan, what's your thinking about the sizing? And then I'll open it up to the panel to weigh in this one.
Yeah, I actually definitely missized here. It definitely should have been bigger, to either 6.5 to 700,000. So, looking back on it now, yeah, definitely was the incorrect sizing. There had been a couple of interesting hands that hasn't been posted on here just because they're just all over the place out there, and we could talk about them some other time. But there was considerable hand where I called a 4-bet with 10-9 off out of the big blind, because I had a read on my opponent. And then I played it coy for half an hour, 40 minutes until it was revealed on stream, essentially.
Yes.
So there's a lot of going on in terms of how I've played previously on the final table versus now. So like in theory, definitely should have been bigger. Just incorrect sizing here for sure.
And I that's a good dynamic to bring in. So there is a lot of metagame happening because this is being streamed on a 30-minute delay. And so players get to see the hands that have been played earlier and the kind of lines that players are taking. And I think even if this was an in position spot, you know, the smaller sizing makes sense. It's just the out of position one that made me default to larger sizing. Rob, you unmuted there first.
I like a bigger bet here. Normally you would bet bigger because you're going to be out of position. And I remember there was a lot of conversation on the table and in the chat during the Twitch stream about that 10-9 hand. So it looked like people were looking at Lauchlan at that time as if he was getting out of line. So maybe the smaller bet turned out working to get him more chips than he would have had he made it a bigger bet. So at one hand, it looked like he was getting out of line. The other hand, it looks like a smaller 3-bet makes it look like he's trying to get value from a big hand. But then the other dynamic of the 10-9, yeah, I think it all probably worked out in his favor. But generally, I would take a bigger bet size here.
Yeah, and this is interesting because Lauchlan, you've been posting links. One of the great things about the RecPoker community is like you've got a rail, you know, you've got friends to cheer you on. So a lot of our members had been picking up your action in Discord, and they were clicking on the link and watching the stream. And so when Rob says he was like following along the chatter as it goes, like that metagame really matters because when you know the cards are going to be revealed in 30 minutes, it really cuts down to like, okay, so how can I play against my image now if these players are in the know and know what they're doing and you know, you're kind of counter exploiting them. Terry, you were unmuted earlier. Did you still want to weigh in there?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Owen Shields from the ground up, Run It Once. I watched his course, and he highly advises as when you're out of position, small blind, especially 4.5 to 5x the open. And if you're in the big blind, you don't really want to go less than 4x the open. I mean, you really want to put the pressure on them, especially if they're opening in late position. Usually they have a wider range there. And you're really just protecting your range in the small and big blind there with the bigger sizing.
Yeah, and Lauchlan, like has already mentioned, he feels like this was not the correct sizing. So we're not going to keep dragging you over the coals, but I want to just like hear the different reasons that people sort of think about the sizing and that kind of stuff, because this is an important point in the tournament. So sorry, Terry, finish that up and then we'll hear from Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. We learn from every tournament we play, right? I mean, we're always analyzing, you know, what we did or what we could have done better. Should we block bet the river or whatever, right? I mean, so it's a learning experience, just like any other situation.
Yep. And you know, it's nice. Lauchlan's doing a great job of posting these spots where he knows he didn't play it perfectly. And you have to kind of make yourself vulnerable to the criticism of your peers in order to improve, which is, I think, speaks to how you've done such a good job improving over the last couple of years. Mark, what's on your mind?
Could anyone guess the correct 3-bet size?
I know. I knew you were going to have an answer for us here. Yeah. I'm going to guess. Well, my first guess was 6.5. I'm going to guess 6.5, something like that. Blow us away.
The correct 3-bet size would be 12 big blinds.
Oh my God, that's so big. Is that because of the stack depth? Or tell us about it.
Eyes like going wide open, like, oh my God, that's shocking.
Yeah. So
why is it so big?
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about Mark. Why do you think that is?
The idea is that you basically, well, okay, first, when you 3-bet smaller, what the person in position is going to do, the person is not going to fold any hands and gets to play the positional advantage in a very deep stack scenario, and he can leverage that. Let's say, like in that example, the flop was Jack 8-7, right? So he can just, let's say he bets flop, and like the straights are completing, he can just barrel it off, and you just have a hard time calling down with aces. The second thing is you want to decrease the stack to pot ratio, so you actually get to play maybe a 2-3 game on some runouts. And now people are gonna say, well, I have aces, I want to get value. That's what every recreational player would say, but like you're right, but you do get aces, but what if you have like a king 10 offsuit?
Yeah.
Like you get folds, right? How is he gonna know if you have aces or king 10 off? Basically, the idea of GTO is to make the other guy indifferent. So if you have enough bluffs, he's actually indifferent whether you have aces or king 10 off. Like he just has to deal with it. What if it's the only 3-bet size you will ever face from me from this moment, right? Like what are you gonna do? Like just fold every time?
Yeah.
So that's
So-
the
Yeah, so the factors that I want to just speak about here or really ask about, Mark. So we're in an ICM, we're in a heavy ICM situation. We're out of position. The opponent is the one player that covers us. So I
Yeah,
don't
you
think
don't
we're not going to be 3-betting often, right? Like we're not going to be 3-betting as frequently as we might in other circumstances. So I get that means that we can size up a bit.
Well-
Is that true?
Well, you're supposed to 3-bet 10%.
Mhm.
So you're folding 75% and 3-betting 10% and play calls with 15%. And hands like ace queen suited would be a call. Hands like pocket tens and pocket jacks would be a call. But
Interesting.
what I know that what people do in reality, they 3-bet those because they are in chip EV spots, they are 3-bets, but in ICM, you basically don't want to bust it against a chip leader. And I know like I wouldn't even go 12 big blinds in reality. Like I also am human and I want to get value from with my aces. I think you can I think the thing that you want to take away is you just want to go big. You want to say, hey, I have aces or I have the ace-5 offsuit. Like,
Right.
but you don't want to have a small size where the guy can call everything in position and he can just represent a lot of straights, a lot of different hands over like 3 streets.
And so, Mark, if we're calling with hands like ace queen suited and pocket jacks and pocket tens, that tells me if we're 3-betting 10% of hands, we're 3-betting our very best hands and then just a ton of blocker kind of ace X hands, you know.
I'm gonna tell you the hands that we're supposed to.
Fill me the rest of the range there that we're supposed to be
So
3-betting.
our value range would be queens and ace queen offsuit. Ace queen offsuit goes for the 3-bet because it plays very bad multi-win. But
Yeah.
anyways, so the bluffs would be like an ace-5 off, ace-7 off, ace-9 off, ace-10 off, king-4 suited, king-deuce suited, king-6 suited, like all these hands that just like whatever. If you 4-bet me, I don't care folding like these trashy hands. But like to 3-bet jacks and get 4-bet on.
Mhm.
What was actually the stack size again of the 2 other stacks?
So the 2 other stacks, if we had about 80 bigs or 86 bigs, one of the other stacks would have like 60 something, and then one of them had like less than 10 big blinds, I think.
Oh wow,
Is that
okay.
about accurate?
One,
Lauchlan?
Yeah. So it's more like 7 big ones was the shortest. Then there
Yeah.
was I think 33. There's like
Okay.
considerable between third and me.
Okay.
And then the chip leader had 12 million in chips, so just over 100.
All right. So the
So-
one real short. Yeah.
so that one guy is basically out of the tournament. And it would be a disaster if we 3-bet jacks and get coolered and like our stack is actually like in terms of money, it's worth like $250,000. And just to get coolered with jacks and win 85, like it feels like a huge loss. Like when is the next time you get a spot for 250K?
Right.
I just wouldn't take the risk to get 3-bet with jacks. Because what do you gain by gaining chips in that? Like that's what ICM is. Like chips you gain are not as valuable because you have 80 bigs. It doesn't matter if you have 80 bigs now or 120 bigs or 160 bigs. You still get paid fourth if you bust out.
Yeah.
So you do want to survive that one person because it just you just get the straight payout, and it has no meaning to you how many big blinds you have.
Yeah. And so the last thing we'll just sort of go over here before we move on is I noticed when you were talking, Mark, about the other hands that were 3-betting here, a lot of them are ace X hands, king X hands. They're blocker bluffs. And basically what we're saying is it's less likely that our opponent has aces, kings, ace X, king X, which means it's more likely that we fold. And it's better for us to be using hands where we can comfortably and easily fold to a 4-bet without even having to worry about protecting the value of our hand. Some of those hands that we actually feel better about and want to see a flop with, we're just going to take the call line here instead, even though they might be 3-bet in a different situation. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So we make the 3-bet. The villain does call, and yes, it was too small a 3-bet, so they're calling all the time. One of the downsides of the smaller 3-bet is that we don't actually learn much about their range because they're going to call with virtually all the hands that they opened with because we're giving them such a good price to play in position and with the chip leader. So their range is extremely wide at this point. Yeah, Mark, did you have something else?
Also, one more thing. I think I said it before, and I'm just going to say it again. Most people do not find a 3-bet with king 4 or king deuce suited.
Sure.
Like who 3-bets king 4 suited to 5 big blinds?
Oh,
or
not
like
to 5 big blinds. Yeah, no.
ace
no
5
way.
offsuit, right? That's the idea. Like I mean, even at such a when the short stack has 7 big blinds, it takes some balls just to now in that moment get involved with the chip leader, even going for 10 big blinds.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay,
I'm
so
sorry for interrupting you. But
no, please, this is good stuff. I love getting interrupted on the Rec Poker podcast because it usually means someone smarter than me has something to say. So I'm very open to that idea. So the flop comes Jack 8-7 rainbow, which isn't a great board for our 3-betting range. We have a lot of over pairs here. We have a lot of unpaired Broadway cards. The calling range of our opponent actually kind of smashes a board like this. They've got a lot of those middle cards. They've got like pair plus draw hands here. And we are, well, let's just get into it here. So the hero checks, which is range versus range, I think makes a lot of sense. We're out of position. It is the chip leader. Does anyone want to advocate for a bet here? Because I think when you're in a 3-bet pot, you can typically continue with a continuation bet that's relatively small. You've already built a range advantage. On the boards that you're going to c-bet, I think a small c-bet makes sense. I'm not sure this is one of those boards, though. Does anyone have an argument for leading? We're just going to be checking a lot here. Yeah, Mark.
Well, so if you run this hand in the sim would probably check because the button just has every trash hand in his range.
Yes. Right.
It would be kind of weird just to bet 2 big blinds and go for small sizing because it doesn't accomplish anything. He's not indifferent. He's not called indifferent with any holding. He's just not called.
Yes.
Had we gone bigger, we could, and he calls the 3-bet, I would still check. Just because I don't have jacks in my range, I don't have 9s, 10s, 9, 10, 8, 7. So like it's not like the person who has the nuts has the betting drives betting patterns, and I just don't have enough nuts in that range on that board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we do check. And the villain bets 3.75 big blind. So that's about a third of the pot. I think if I'm doing my math right here, 5 plus 5 plus 2.5 So yeah, between like a quarter and a third of the pot size. And so, as I'm fond of saying, let's look at all our options here. It's Jack 8-7 rainbow. We've got pocket aces. We're not folding. So are we calling? Are we check raising small, or are we check raising big? What does the group think is the best play here? 3-bet pot. We're holding an overpair. The board kind of favors our opponent's range, but they should be betting here a fair bit too. Like they should be bluffing here sometimes when we check, because it looks like we've got ace king, ace queen, and like we're just giving up on it. Any thoughts before we get into the next action here? All right, so our hero Lauchlan Swann goes for the check raise here. In the comments, Lauchlan, that you posted in the forum here, you say, I knew I wanted to check raise, but after they clicked me back or just over a click, I guess we'll get into that here, I didn't know what to do. So you're planning to check raise. And was this so tell me a little bit about it. Like you're hoping that they have a hand like King Jack or something, like a one pair hand where you're still ahead of, but you're going to get value. You sort of like had this plan to check raise no matter what. Is that right?
Yeah, for the most part, like on any board that I felt like that I was still ahead on, and I still feel my hand is the best hand at this point, regardless of my small 3-bet pre, that I wanted to check raise, especially it's the chip leader who cared a little bit more about ICM than me, but that's the person I felt I had the biggest edge on post flop still. I wanted to put them in a very uncomfortable spot, and going into the final table, and like anyone that I've spoken to says that's what I did. I wanted to play uncomfortable pots against people, put them in weird spots, because I just wanted to try and win. So I was trying to make an uncomfortable spot. Like, and I check raised to 1.1 million here, which is 11 bigs. And yeah, just always was planning to. With how the action unfolded previously, we can talk about that in a moment, but I had some thoughts about what would happen already if something like the way it did happen. So, and this is where I came from. I said the other week, when I don't have a lot of history against the person, this is the first time I've actually played with this particular person in a tournament before. And I was fortunate enough to sit with them day 2 and day 3. So I had some history with them at this point. But I imagine what I would do if I was the villain and I was playing against myself. Not always the best bet because I don't play very optimal, but I think that's where I get a bit of my creative lines from and stuff like that. So I just felt like without the action played so far, check raising was going to be the best way to get money in, and I knew in this hand I was going to become the chip leader if I win the hand. So while the ICM doesn't really care about first and second, as Mark said, because like if you come fourth, you still come fourth regardless of how many big lines you had. I was trying to set myself up to have a dominating lead to try and win the event.
Yep, that makes sense. So we go for the check raise to 11 big blinds, and the villain almost flicks it back here. They 3-bet to 25 bigs, or 2.5 million. So this is a, we're not going to see this that frequently. Like post flop 3-bets aren't that common. What does anyone have anything they want to weigh in with at this point before we just get to the next point in the decision tree? All right, so we've check raised pocket aces on Jack 8-7 rainbow, and we've gotten it clicked back to us for about a quarter of our stack, maybe a little over a quarter of our stack. And we're kind of in a difficult position here, I think. Let's just look at all the options. We can call, we can fold. I think it would be difficult to raise to a size that's not all in. I don't see any not all in raises in our arsenal here. It's kind of hard to click it back ourselves out of position with so little back. So I think it's fold, call, or shove. Does anyone want to advocate for any of those actions? Does anyone want to advocate for a fold or for a call or for a shove? Or is there any, what should we be thinking about in this moment at this final table? All right, that's cool. We're all playing it close to the vest. So, or here, Mark. Yeah, what did you have?
Yeah, I can give my thoughts.
Yeah, give us your
So
thoughts.
this hand is just way off what theories, like it's what anyone is supposed to do, but
Yeah,
whatever.
we've left the solvers behind at
Yeah.
this point, which is part of Lauchlan's plan. Like his plan is, let's make people uncomfortable. Let's take unconventional lines with large sizings and apply some pressure. So that has been accomplished. Yeah.
So when villain does that, it's not, maybe it's ace jack, I don't know. It could be ace jack, I guess. It shouldn't be, but whatever. It could be ace jack. It could be well, all the selects, the straights, and then some random air balls. And I think to stack ace jack or king jack, you should just get it in. You're getting stacked by straights anyways. But I think you deny yourself the opportunity of the villain bluff shoving if you jam. So I actually, in that case, would just make it 36 big blinds. And
Oh, so you
just,
do the
I
click
do,
back.
yeah, like,
Yeah,
it looks like you're full of shit.
Right. Yeah.
And then just if he calls, I just jam every turn. And if he, at this point, like the villain can at least jam over the top. Like it maybe gives him the illusion that I could have ace king.
Mhm. Mhm. And Mark, I want to just be perfectly clear. Are there, like, when we click it back there, we're putting so much of our chips in, so many of our chips in, that we really are almost handcuffed to continuing on every turn. Like it's almost
Yeah,
like
jam every turn.
we sort of told, we may as well have gotten it all in here because we're getting it all in anyway, but we're giving them that chance to bluff at it or to bet at it instead of having to call. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
are there any turns that we don't put it in? Like, is there a, like another
I think on
jack
the
or
10
is
or
there a,
9, I would actually check call.
okay, but we're still getting it in. We're still
We are
giving them
getting
a
it,
chance
yeah.
to, yeah. And this is I think a point that escapes a lot of recreational poker players, which is, you know, we decide that we have to shove because we're like pot committed.
Because
You can sorry?
because it's uncomfortable to play turns when the turn is a 10 or a 9.
Right. But if you sort of told yourself that you are pot committed and you are getting it in anyway,
But
then
he doesn't know that, right?
he doesn't know it exactly. He thinks he's still got some fold equity, and but you have to follow through on that, like because otherwise you really shouldn't be doing this move if you're not committing to getting it all in. So effectively, what you're doing is you're still putting all your chips in the middle, but the range of hands that your opponent has isn't the strong range that can only call your shove. It's just that it includes the other hands that they might not call the shove with, but now they're going to get it in.
Yeah, like we're basically playing street poker, which means like he can think I'm full of it. I'll just pretend like I'm full of it, and then he can just if he has I don't know, a pair and he puts me on this, he might actually stick it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all right, any other thoughts at this point from anybody? We're getting into the meat of it here. So I think that's like a very sophisticated play. I had discounted the small raise in my analysis because, like, again, what happens if they call? And I think the answer is you just get it in. You just get it in one street later, no matter what. Which I do like. I do like that.
So just because I know what GTO plays doesn't mean like I can get into the streets and just play like random lines that like I actually know what the right line is. So if you deviate from it, I know how much you're deviating from it. And like if we are playing streets, I was born in the streets. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Like I'll do some crazy shit that you wouldn't see.
I love it. That's right. Well, you get the benefit, like, Mark, that's one of the things I like about talking to you about poker is you've got the, the same killer instinct that Lauchlan is talking about here. But you've also just spent so much time breaking these hands down in solvers and sims, and it's a deadly combination when you're born in the streets, but then you also get to, polish that silver spoon a little bit till it's got a hard edge and you can get at it. Like that's a lot to contend with. So no, kudos. So we end up shoving here. So they click it back to us. Lauchlan goes for the shove. Lauchlan, let me ask you two questions. So did you consider folding? Did you consider calling? Did you consider a small raise like Mark advocates for, or was it just I'm just gonna shove and get it in here no matter what?
So, as I said at the start, I was always going to check raise on most boards because I felt like I'd had the best hand. So I still feel like I had the best hand here, and I was never going to fold because I felt like I put in a little paragraph. I felt if they had like a set or a jack with how I've been playing, they would just flat and let me blast off, essentially. So I discounted those hands that had smashed the board because again, I think against most smart players, they would just flat those hands against me as a bit of a meta against me.
Yep.
And then the person, or her name's Gina, had also done a massive bluff a little bit earlier on with a missed draw and gotten kings to fold on the river in a huge ICM spot. So she wasn't afraid to kind of put people in those spots as well. So it's easier. My motto is it's easier to put chips in than to call them off.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
So if I believe I have the best hand, I'm happy to put the chips in. And that's kind of what happened. I like Mark's idea of going smaller. It's actually probably the best line if we're going to deviate, to be honest.
Yeah.
So like that next time this situation arises, I'm probably going to steal that one.
Yeah, that's right. I like it. So you shove, and you do have, and I encourage our listeners, the link to this forum post is in the show notes. So go and take a look at the hand, take a look at the comments that Lauchlan's left, providing some context around the hand. You'll probably see some other replies from other active RecPoker members adding their 2 cents into it here. So my other question then is, and maybe this language is a little antiquated, but is this a value shove or is this a bluff shove? Like, are you hoping to get called by pocket queens or by ace jack, or are you hoping to get folds from a hand like 8-7 or something like that?
So there's two ways to look at it. I believe I'm shoving for value because I believe I have the best hand. But I think ICM would dictate if I was going to shove here the villain. Like I'm shoving to just push the villain off, essentially, mate, perhaps. I don't know exactly, but I feel like when the action is bet, check raise, 3-bet, and then I 4-bet, I should now, if we're going to talk like somehow this hand makes it back to theory, I should have all the best hands there.
Yes.
So the chip leader has just got to concede that I've become the chip leader now, essentially, because there's a stack for 7 big blinds. It's kind of ICM suicide to call off if you don't have the nuts.
Yep.
Essentially.
Yep.
And the way the actions unfolded, I think I've represented nuts.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, I think you can represent jacks this way, like you can represent top set this way. You'd 3-bet pre-flop. You'd be getting aggressive with it here. And then listen, they are gonna have a better hand sometimes, right? Like sometimes they're gonna have jack 8, 8-7, 9-10, set of 8s, set of 7s. Like you've made a good point that they probably flat some of their super strong hands here and let you continue to fire, but they're definitely going to have some hands that beat you here, and they're going to call, or maybe they're going to fold. Like, we don't know. 8-7, does 8-7 call like this shove? I'm kind of curious what the rest of the group thinks here. Say it, Mark.
I said snap call.
Snap call, yeah, you get it no matter what. Yeah.
I'm leading him in the pot.
So this is a spot where it's kind of one of these magical bets. Like better hands are not folding. but we don't mind getting folds from hands that have a lot of equity against us. And we obviously win a big pot when even the hands that are worse than ours fold. So that's yeah, jump in there, Mark. Help me.
Well, no, because hands that have equity against you would not back raise on the flop. They would just continue as a call, like a Jack
Okay.
10.
Jack 10's
So
the hand I was
it's
thinking of. Yeah,
it's
Jack
actually
10,
just
Jack 10.
hands that have you dead, or maybe it's ace jack. Sure, like I'll give him ace jack, but we have two aces.
Yeah, we are blocked.
Then there are like hands that have a 10% or like just like a king 5, where we have like where they just can't win almost.
Mhm. So
So it's very
are we?
polarized.
So are we kind of? I guess my question is: are we kind of overplaying our hand a bit because it's essentially a one pair hand? Like, are we just? Is it a problem that we're letting our opponent play perfectly here, or is it just that we've already locked up so much of the pot that it's okay if they fold worse and only continue with better, because winning this pot with the money that's already in there is such a great outcome at this point in time?
So two results can happen. Basically, like you shove and you get called and you have like 10%, or you shove and he folds the bluffs.
Yeah.
And I think you're basically trying to protect against like getting sucked out on, which isn't a great way to play poker. But because people are too afraid of getting sucked out on. I understand you restack ace jack and king jack, but now you have to rely on them having a jack, and 3-betting the flop and calling your shot. I mean, maybe like I've seen crazier things in live poker.
Yeah, but it does seem like the times that they
It's
call, we're behind. Like they're not calling with worse.
Yeah, like
Very
against
favorable.
anyone that is halfway decent, once you get 3-bet the flop. I mean, good players wouldn't, but if they know you are not check raise bluffing enough, like if I have top set, I would just click it back and like stack aces, right? Because like it's just in that against a good player that has like a somewhat decent range when he 3-bets the flop and he understands that you have a big pair, he'll just get getting fooled almost every time.
Yeah,
But I assume the chip leader wasn't a professional player.
right. All right, Lauchlan, what's on your mind at this point in the analysis?
It's kind of interesting because Mark said something a bit earlier where he says GTOs about making the opponent indifferent, and not that this is a GTO hand by any means, but my shove in my mind makes all the one pair hands indifferent here. Because like ace jack might fold here or call. Like I think it's with the IC, the money implications of the ICM and the pay jumps, and considering there's a stack under 10 big blinds, it's just it's a huge spot to call off with one pair. King jack probably even like really struggles the call, considering there's still ace jack there. That thing, like I've just in my mind and how I played, I knew if I got snapped off, I'm losing, and I've just got to accept that. I die by the sword,
Yeah.
type of situation. But the moment they think about it, my hand is good every time at this point in time.
Yep. Yeah, take it.
So I did mention like ace jack and king jack might call, might fold, whatever. But against those hands, you have 92%. Like there's no reason for you to want them to fold, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's just like the way the 3-bet flop, like the flop being 3-bet is like, I thought my best move was to shove. It's like the other situation it could have been was that it's a mad setup and she had kings. Like
Yes, true.
like
That's
this
true.
is like a just
Didn't
mad
fold that
call.
pre-flop.
Oh yeah, they probably 4-bet that pre-flop, but yeah, we don't
That's
know.
you
We
when
don't know.
you're out of range.
That's right. I do that all the time. I'm so bad at that. Thank you, Mark. That's a good point.
They wouldn't have kings there because you were saying that they might have shoved pre with jacks in your comments. So
Right, right,
That's
right.
true. That's true as
yeah,
well.
so they don't have any of those big hands, queens, kings, jack.
Now we are playing against an imaginary range, right?
It is a bit of an imaginary range. I didn't know what to do, and yeah, it's like
Yeah,
the
because we
winning
didn't
that
use
pot
see that.
with the chips in the middle at that point put me at chip leader. Yeah, very interesting spot. Like obviously, and by no means did I play any of that final table correctly. If you go back and watch that, I made a lot of mistakes. But the one thing I'll defend myself with, I always play that aggressive style. I always die by the sword or I'll live by it. So at least I'm consistent with it. And while that will change in the future, and I'm going to find to become a solid player, that is the goal, obviously. I got to do what works currently and learn while doing that.
Yeah, well, and one of the great things about poker is, there are multiple equilibriums. And I think having a playing style that's more aggressive and bombastic and, uses large sizes and puts people under a lot of pressure, even if it's not, technically correct, I don't want to play against you. You're going to make everyone at the table uncomfortable. Like it's a difficult player type to play against because the only way that you can really combat that is by sucking up and calling down, and making your own bluff raises and that kind of stuff. So I think if you're in, none of us are playing poker correctly by the book, but even if you're playing incorrectly, taking the approach that you've taken with your game, Lauchlan, about applying pressure and putting people in difficult positions and using your reads, which you're obviously very good at. I think that's the right side of it to be working on. All right. So any other thoughts at this point here? This hand really illustrates one of the tensions that I feel in poker a lot, which is like, why am I making this bet? Is it to get called by worse? Is it to make better to fold? Is it to, deny equity to my opponent? And the different scenarios that we find ourselves in, ICM, table, tournament stage, that all those kind of things seem to change the calculus on that sometimes. So this is a good example of that hand where it's like, yeah, Lauchlan, jump in.
Yeah, so and to finish it off, I think the opponent had pocket sixes, Mark. So can you tell me, does the opponent have a bluff? Like if they're going to three bet the flop, like his pocket six is going to be bluffing there. So it's a very, very out of line hand from both sides, really. But
yeah.
Well, sixes they would find the bet on the flop, but they wouldn't call it. They would just fold it with your check raise. And
right,
that's the thing, like that people don't understand. People don't understand about theory or GT or whatever you want to call it. Is like I make an action based on my hand and not based on what you do. Based on what you do, but against a certain, like you made it 1.1 million. So I will find enough defense against that sizing, so I don't mind folding sixes. Like it's not high up in my range, but I have like Jack 10 to defend. I have Ace Jack to defend. Let's say you would be bluffing. I have Ace Jack to defend, right? I can defend with a lot of different hands. Like I can defend with an Ace 10, which has an overcard to King and a gut shot. Like there are a lot of hands that I can continue with. It doesn't have to be sixes. Like another thing when you say like when you play aggressive, I remember I played in a live tournament one time and I was bluffing 3 times in a row and I got caught every time. And like the fourth time I opened a hand, I'm like, okay, that's an open. I guess we open it. And by the turn, I'm like, I really have to bluff this again, right? Because it's perfect. I'm just doing it. I'm like emotionless to it because I know it's the right play. When you say aggressive, would you like be willing to like just triple it off 4 times in a row? Like I just don't care about. I mean, I do care a little bit, but if it's a perfect hand, like I just triple it because I'm supposed to triple it, and that's how I play this.
yeah, and that's definitely how I see it. So very unrefined compared to you, obviously, which is kind of cool. So definitely, gonna try and jump into those monthly study sessions with you, because I'm not afraid to put the chips in, and I think that's the biggest strength of my game. Is I'm willing to put money into the pot. And if I had advice for anyone that's like kind of wanting to progress into bigger stakes from the pub leagues, is you just have to suck it up and put it in there when you think you're best.
Yeah. And, poker is a game where I'd rather, if I was coaching someone, to steal a Mike Tomlinism, I'd rather say, whoa, than sick 'em. Like, I want players that are naturally aggressive, where we can say, okay, now let's just scale that back a bit. So we're finding better spots to employ that aggression. It's much easier to teach someone to look for spots to be more restrained than it is to encourage them to turn their poker game into an aggressive poker. So I think having that instinct actually serves you really well. And the more you study and the more you look into these spots, the more you'll find those quantifiable differences between when it's a good time to do it and when it's a good time to say whoa a little bit there. So I think you're definitely on the right side of it. And again, I take my hat off to you and the attitude that you have towards this learning mindset and continuing to develop as a player with these really, I mean, listen, Lauchlan, congratulations on these freaking amazing results, dude.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, like we've given you a lot of stuff to think about how we do things differently and blah blah blah. I've never won $120,000 in a poker tournament, and it's not just a fluke. You've had these results. I've seen you play. You know what you're doing. And it's very impressive. So I'm glad that it hasn't gone to your head to the point where you're like, well, I'm just the best fucking poker player in Australia now, and just get in line. And yeah, so kudos to you. I really think like you've got a good mix of talent, mindset, the fact that you've only been playing for a couple of years, like that really raises the ceiling on how high your game can go. So I would encourage you to maintain this positive attitude, keep grinding, and yeah, I mean, if you're a RecPoker member and you're not paying attention to Mark's office hours on the first Thursday of every month, I would say, I don't know what you're doing with your $15, but like it's for some of the higher value stuff that we're doing here at RecPoker. So you'd be in good company. Come get involved and share some ideas and see how we can all get better together. It's very impressive to see it all come together.
No, definitely. I appreciate obviously the community and all the support, and yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, any other parting thoughts, gang, before we wrap this puppy up? Doesn't look like it. I mean, I want to thank the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Find out more about them at runaces.com. Thank you to them for all the support and all our premium members. Thanks to Mark Zhang, Terry Landon, Lauchlan Swann, and Rob Washington in particular tonight. And to you, the listeners, thanks for tuning in. We're almost at 600 episodes here at RecPoker. We couldn't have done it without you. So we'll see you next week on the RecPoker podcast. Good night, everybody.
Jim just rocking out there.